All right, thank you everyone for coming today and we're going to get started here. Thank you for joining us. This topic today is near and dear to my heart because I am a theater professional, a theater artist, and I love talking about why theater matters and why we do theater, because it's not always a known thing. It's not a fun party. It's not a it's not just because we want to go out and play all the time. It actually does have a significance to our community and what we do. So just a few things before we get started. We have a chat function that you can leave questions and a Q&A function that you can also leave questions there a little bit more anonymously if you would like. As you saw on our slide, if you enjoy the session today, you can text MIND to 56512 and give us a small donation for these classes today. They will always be free, but we appreciate any small donation you can provide. Our guest today is not much of a guest because he's been part of this series this whole time. And I think there's something here to note that every path and every story on an artist's journey is not alike, but there are a lot of similarities and there's a lot of stuff that brings us together as a community. For instance, I'm from a very small town in Montana. Michel Hausmann, our guest, is from Venezuela. And somehow we find ourselves together working with the same vision to create theater that matters. And so it is my immense pleasure to introduce you and welcome the courageous and visionary Michel Hausmann. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Jessica. This is a wonderful introduction. You know, for me, it's always, I picture you in a Montana prairie, even though I know you're now in Orlando. But every time we Zoom during this pandemic, I have this image of a wonderful prairie behind you. Anyways, Jessica is our general manager, also present. Is our director of education, Viana Rodriguez. So I'm extremely excited about this class. I've actually thought about it. We've talked about it for a while, and so let's get ready to. I'm going to share a presentation. Give me a second. It's gonna hold on. It's gonna take me a second, and share screens. All right, here we go. Boom. Okay. So welcome everyone. So this lecture is called The Role of a Theater Artist in Society. Okay. Warning, it will be messy, epic, ambitious, somewhat disorganized, personal and political story. It will all make sense. Probably. Here we go. Art is not a mirror held up to reality, but a hammer with which to shape it, says the great theater artist Bertolt Brecht. And I love this quote because, you know, theater is a dangerous, you know, art in general is a dangerous object. It is something that bites back. It is not, you know, this healing, beautiful thing of a wall. No, art changes and shapes the world by partially shattering it. And that is what is wonderful about art. And I want to talk about some great works of art that do that. I want to start with Guernica by Pablo Picasso. This was painted in 1937. Picasso was already in exile in Paris. The Spanish Civil War was, you know, at the height. The nationalists led by Franco were trying to overthrow the democratically elected Republican government of, you know, a left-leaning, it's called Republican, but it's a left-leaning government, and it erupted in a civil war. And the Basque country was one of the most fiercely opposed to the nationalists. And by that time, Franco asked his buddies, Hitler and Mussolini, to help him in the war. And so the Nazis and the fascists bombarded the town of Guernica. And the town of Guernica was mainly women and children at that time. And over 1,000 people, mainly women and children, died. And it shocked Picasso in a way that he created this work of art. There are no pictures of the bombardment of Guernica, but Pablo Picasso created this painting, which is amazing. It tells the truth without having to be realistic. You have there on the left, you know, what it looks like Madonna and Child, a famous paint, you know, a famous image that a lot of painting has of mother, you know, Mary and the dead Jesus, but in this case, it's of course a dead baby. It's a very violent work of art, and it changed the world. It made people see the Spanish Civil War in a different way. It brought attention to the Spanish Civil War. It raised money for the Republicans. Again, Republicans are the leftist government of the time. So you know, it changed the world. A second. Okay, so Dorothea Lange was an American photographer, and she was actually hired by the US government during the Great Depression to take a photographical account of what was going on in America at the time, of how the country was dealing with the Great Depression. And, you know, she photographed this image that it's amazing, this image, because, you know, it was taken 90 years ago or so, and it still resonates. I recognize this woman. I recognize this woman in every crisis we've had. I recognize this woman if she was a Syrian refugee. I recognize this woman if she was a Mexican immigrant. There is something about this image of a mother looking almost, you know, both forward, but part helplessly, but yet there's some dignity in her, and then her kids are around her. I find this such a moving work of art that forces me to see deeper, to ask more questions. And I think that an image like this changes our perception of in this case, of the Great Depression, but because it's so universal, it's empathic, and I think it changes how we understand certain kind of suffering. And I'm haunted by this image. Sorry,
it becomes personal and individual looking at this than thinking of the Great Depression as a
right.
long time ago.
That's right.
Things happened.
It's one death, you know, I don't know, one death is tragedy, a million death is a data point, right? So, you know, that's right. And that's I think the theme, it's that stories of these lectures, that stories matter. But let's continue. So this is, you know, a really interesting piece, Queen Mother. It's an ivory mask from Benin. Benin is a city in Nigeria. It's early 16th century. There's actually two identical. One is at the Met in New York. The other one is at the British Museum. And it was a gift by a son who became king to his mother. The mother helped him become king because the father had died. There were two sons, different mothers. They fought, and one son won. And then he, you know, commissioned this mask for the mother, which is interesting because it is, you could see there the face of the mother. But what I find haunting about this is that around her, you can see it, there's all these small little figures, and you kind of don't know what they are. but they are actually Portuguese colonialists. This was sort of the beginning. You know, the Portuguese were coming to Benin, to Nigeria, to enslave people. But we didn't know that. They didn't know that at the time. They're considered kind of like a ghostly figures. They couldn't make sense who they were. So they really surround the mask. And, you know, seeing it now, 500 years later, you know, there is a sense of, you know, of them not knowing what was good. Those little people around it completely destroyed that culture. And so that, you know, for that reason, I find this mask really fascinating. There we go. Okay, so Antigone. Funny enough, Antigone is also a story about two sons fighting for the throne. The throne was Oedipus, and he, you know, blind himself and left town. Now, Antigone is written by Sophocles, you know, 2,500 years ago. It tells the story of Antigone, the daughter of Oedipus, king of Thebes, and her siblings entered a terrible civil war. Both of them died. Creon, the uncle who then inherited the throne, called one son a hero, the other son a traitor, and forbade the traitor son of Oedipus to have a proper burial. So whoever there buries this son would be killed. And Antigone thought that that was an unjust law. Both of them are her brothers. Doesn't matter if one did one thing and the other, both were her brothers and both deserve a proper burial. So she broke the law and buried her brother, Cleopas. And, you know, big Creon became very angry and eventually sentenced her to death. Now, what is very interesting about Antigone is a couple things. One of them is that it really deals about what happens when a law is unjust. It is legal, but it is unjust. And I think that has been a theme of humanity since then. The other theme of this play is about tyranny. It's about absolute power. What happens when a ruler doesn't hear what other people have to say? So Creon decided to kill Antigone, but everybody in town was saying like, hey man, is this the wisest thing? Can't you understand her point of view? You know, the prophet came and, you know, the oracle came and told him like, this will be bad for you. But Creon did not care what the scientist community, sorry, what the people, what his own advisors were saying, and decided to do what he felt was right. So that is tyranny. That is tyranny. One person, one man rule. So the fact is that Antigone has been performed for 2,500 years uninterrupted because it deals with something critical about the human experience, about laws, about government, and it really changed the course of history because Antigone became part of our collective unconsciousness, and it has been performed so much that it has shed light into government and into civil disobedience. And so, you know, when Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, you know, every time a disobedient movement begins, it's always compared to the plight of Antigone. And I find that fascinating. Empathy is the most powerful weapon, says Augusto Boal. And Augusto Boal is was a Brazilian theater maker. And this is the essence of theater. Theater is seeing someone on stage with their problem. The moment you see somebody and you look at it through their feed, their experience, you develop empathy. And sometimes you develop empathy for different points of view. And I think that that is extremely powerful. I don't know how many art forms really have the power of doing that. Theater, it's in our DNA. We've been telling stories around a fire since, millennia and millennia ago. The Greeks package it into what we know of theater today, but telling stories, understanding the world through stories, it's in our DNA. It's who we are as human beings. It's what makes us different. We've been telling stories before we invented the wheel, before we invented the sword. Stories are the DNA of our human existence. Okay, so allow me now, we sort of talked about big things, and I want to bring it now, it's smaller. And so allow me for a personal detour. I want to talk a little bit about my own personal journey into becoming an artist, and how it really then resonates with other bigger issues that we've been talking about. So for almost a decade, I had a theater company in Venezuela where we did, mainly revivals of some. We did a couple of world premieres, but we mainly did big musicals. We did Jesus Christ Superstar and The Producers and Fiddler on the Roof. And it's an interesting time as an artist, and certain things started to happen that really made me understand the power of theater. For Fiddler on the Roof, that final scene, Anatevka, where people were leaving, the Jews were leaving Anatevka, resonated with the Venezuelan audience in a way I cannot describe, because at that moment, people were all, this is, the year 2009, 2008, 2010, people were actively leaving Venezuela at a extremely fast pace. So that Anatevka, saying goodbye to your homeland, was seen through completely different eyes than a normal audience in a different part of the world. And that was fascinating. Where we did Gross Indecency, The Three Trials of Oscar Wilde by Moises Kaufman. Suddenly there were editorials written about gay rights and equal marriage, and it was exciting sort of to see that a play making its way in the news section and not in the culture section. Now, another thing happened during my time in Venezuela, which was that we got into quite a bit of trouble. I don't want to get too much into the details of it, but we had two.
I will say, as you do with Fiddler on the Roof and Jesus Christ Superstar.
Right, exactly.
So for a moment.
Exactly. So two plays that would normally, you'll be produced. They became quite controversial in Venezuela for reasons really outside the content of the play. For Fiddler on the Roof, the orchestra didn't want to. The orchestra that had participated in the past did not want to participate this time in the show, because the orchestra received most of its funding from the federal government. Although we were hiring them and paying them market prices, they received their funding from the federal government. And by that time, Chavez had expelled a few months earlier the Israeli ambassador. And the orchestra called me and said, hey, we can't be part of a Jewish show because we will most likely lose our funding if we perform with you. And so, I went to the press with that, and it became a big scandal. And again, the show made its way into the news section and not into the culture section. And it became really an international story. Simon Wiesenthal Center had to write a statement. It was a lot of international media picked it up, and then and it also elevated, in a way, my status as not just a theater director, but as as a culture maker who was not afraid of speaking truth to power. And a lot of people were unfortunate at the time because the government controlled the purse of a lot of funding. And then eventually, a year later, the government intervened in a very lucrative sponsorship between BlackBerry, the phone company, the makers of RIM, the makers of BlackBerry, and our production of Jesus Christ Superstar. That they were going to sponsor it, and the government sort of intervened so that we couldn't use that money in, investing it in independent media, but only on government approved media. And we said no, and it became a big scandal. And then eventually we were tear gassed. Our show was tear gassed. Over 2,000 people were at the theater at the moment where tear gas, we were attacked by tear gas, by masked assailants. So, being a theater maker in harsh time is important, but also the writing was on the wall. Venezuela was not going into the right place. I was getting married. It's not a place to raise a family.
And that's a launching off point there of, I would imagine that provides a person a significant look and change in their life to have a production tear gassed.
Well, absolutely. And I remember very well because I had just had I broke my ACL, and I remember running with my knee that I could barely run, and now I broke my knee again. So as I'm trying to make my way through the house, now I totally remember running at that moment inside the theater, trying to go backstage. Anyway, we could have a whole other conversation about that moment. It was a pivotal moment in my life, but I became an immigrant artist. 6 million Venezuelans left the country since the beginning of the revolution. The majority of them in the past 10 years. I've been one of them. And that's the same number, just so people understand, the same number of Syrian refugees that have left Syria. So this is a diaspora of Syrian proportion. I absolutely was among the luckiest one, the most privileged one. I was able to leave on my own will, and I decided to further advance my artistic journey. I moved to New York. I was very lucky to have a full scholarship at Columbia University. I earned an MFA in theater directed. I worked with some of the best theater artists. Was people like Anne Bogart was she taught us for 3 years a class of only 6 people. Gregory Mosher, some wonderful and I also assisted and worked professionally, and I was directing plays of Broadway. Yet there was a feeling that I still needed to go deeper. I want to just pause for a second. Art needs to always be associated with why. Why is the most important question that we always need to be answering. Why are you doing this? Yes, but why? But why? And I think that great works of art have a strong why. So I think for me, as I was creating my own work, that why needed to be important. And it was key for me finding my story. If I am going to, okay, I've already told a lot of stories. I learn now from the best. Now my turn at the bat. What am I going to do? And so I reached deep into my family trauma in a way. I come from 4 Holocaust surviving grandparents who were lucky enough to survive the war and settle in Venezuela. And I think, my grandmother, Magda, who I call Anyuka, had it the toughest. She was a survivor of Auschwitz. Before the war, she lived in this very small town called Olasliska that you could almost, the war didn't, almost you could not feel that there was a war going on. It was such a remote little village. But, a year before the war ended, the Germans started the deportation of Hungarian Jews, and it mainly was around the big cities, but her neighbors, wanting to keep the little wealth that the Jewish families had there, they called in the SS, and she was deported. Her whole family, except a few siblings, perished. Her niece, everyone. She had 11 siblings. Only four survived the war, and they died a few years after. And my grandmother always had this trauma, of course, understandably, but she also never trusted people. She was very angry. And there's a picture there of my mother, Veronica, with my grandmother. And that, I think, had a great weight on my mother. And I think that affected very much her growing up. And I wanted to artistically investigate that story a little bit. And so I was wondering what would happen if my grandmother, if the tables would have turned, if my grandmother had to decide whether she would hide a person that probably would be dead if they wouldn't find a hiding place, but also the act of hiding that person would immediately risk you and your family. So would you do that? Many people risk their lives to hide Jews during the many Gentiles. So, and I was wondering, would my grandmother hide a Jew? Like, would she, of course, survive herself? What would happen if it was the other way around? So I wanted to explore that, and I had this idea of, originally I imagined this story taking place in Venezuela, where my family, where we were from, where my mother was born, where my grandmother immigrated to. There was an uprising, a guerrilla movement. Wasn't a very big guerrilla movement, but there was some guerrilla movement in the 1960s trying to overthrow the democracy. And so I imagined what happened if a guerrilla fighter had to find shelter in my grandmother's house. Would she give him shelter, even though that means risking her own life? Now, when you're trying to tell a story, you're trying to find, truth, and truth sometimes is not necessarily the reality. So I decided, I decided to tell this story setting it somewhere else. So instead of in Caracas, I set it in Havana. And a couple of reasons for that was that, there was also, like Venezuela, a strong Jewish community. But the difference was that there was a guerrilla movement in Havana, and they won. So I found that to be even more dramatically interesting, because the tables would then turn once more. And I found that fascinating. And so I created this musical with two collaborators who did lyrics and music, by the way. I'm plugging in for them. I think it's next. When is it, Jess, that they have the course of?
Next Wednesday at 11.
Next Wednesday at 11. Len Schiff and Salomon Lerner, my wonderful collaborators, are going to do a lecture about writing musical theater. And I would sign up for it. It's going to be outstanding. It's going to give you tools if you want to try to start thinking about writing your own musical. It's an outstanding class. So, so this is a couple of images. I was lucky enough for the production to be produced at La Mama, that I directed, and at Barrington Stage Company. And then eventually in Miami, it would be the beginning of Miami New Drama, but let's just hold that thought for a second. It's gonna be a theme of me not trying to be able to pass the slides. Okay, cool. Okay, so now what? A good question. There was something that was missing about doing theater. I loved doing Golem of Havana. It was, for me, the most artistic, satisfying thing for me to do, but there was something missing. And that something had a heck of a lot to do with community. What I missed most about Venezuela was that for almost a decade, I was in constant communication with a community. And we, we grew together. They saw my company grow to be one of the largest in the country, and I, you know, and we were able to talk about some important themes. But that relationship to a community was what I really found that I was missing. And although I love New York, you know, I really wanted to start a theater company, and I find absolutely no reason to start a theater company in New York. You know, then again, this is the important, this is the key here. Why? Why am I going to start a theater company? I really, really needed to answer that question. There are, you know, thousands of theater countries, thousands of theater companies across the country. Why start yet another one? And then the other question I needed to answer was where? Where am I going to start this theater company? And the answer to that, and I'm going to try to explain both in a second, it's Miami. I decided that I needed to start my theater company in Miami. It's a city I knew well. I had come as a child. Every year, Venezuela is very close to Miami, so it was a very common vacation place. And as soon as, you know, the Bolivarian Revolution started to destroy Venezuela, Miami has become the city with the most Venezuelan exiles. As it happens with all of Latin America, every time there is a conflict in a conflict, okay, that's Golda, man, thank you. Okay, every time there is a conflict in Latin America or a crisis, then people from there move to Miami. So, you know, Miami is a city of immigrants. It is a city where I can go and say, I am just like everyone else. You know, and I think that is a very powerful thing. And it's important, you know, this is the Ellis Island. And I'll get to that in a second, but really to understand Miami, we first need to understand America. So this is a demographic picture of America today. 60% of America are white, or what we call in Miami, white Anglos. So it's the majority of Americans, yet that majority has been shrinking significantly, but it holds strong at 60%. There is the first largest minority is the Hispanic, which is the one that has been growing dramatically in the past 20 years. Hispanics make now 18% of America, and African Americans make 13% of America. So all in all, that is 30. That's a third of America is either African American or Hispanic, and of course, you know, Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, and you know, people who've been in this country longer than anyone make you know, between 1% and 2%. And of course, there's Asian Americans, etc. But that is sort of the picture of America. Now, here's a picture of Miami. What do you see in different here? Miami is 67% Hispanic, 17% either African American or Afro-Caribbean, and 13% white Anglo. 13. So if you are creating, if you are catering to that audience alone, you are doomed to have small houses, small museums, small orchestra. You know, a lot of the place, especially in the last 30, I think the last 5 years, you know, things have dramatically changed, but you know, New York was primarily a Broadway. It's a very white, very white place with very white authors. And so if if you're only trying to tell those type of stories, you're going to find a very small audience here in Miami. And therefore, you get things like the Coconut Grove Playhouse being a very big theater in the 1950s to going bankrupt 15 years ago. And I think part of it, has to do with the demographic changes. And now there is, of course, talk about, doing a very small version of what the Coconut Grove Playhouse was. It's only 300 seats, which, is fine. But I believe that when you cater to this 100%, I think your audience is infinite. It's huge. It's an extraordinary market. 54% of Miami is foreign born. So, it is a place, it is home. It is people, immigrants. And that, that's what makes America extraordinary, is that it's a country of immigrants. Everybody is an immigrant, or because their grandparents, great-grandparents were, and sometimes, it's another conversation, but people fled places and came to this country. That's why I think it's so important to understand the plight of people from El Salvador and Mexico fleeing violence, and Syria, and etc., because that's the DNA of our country. And there's always been, of course, historical people saying, wait, if we let the Irish, that's going to change the country forever. We can't let the Irish in, etc. But immigration has always made us a much better and wonderful place. That's my 2 cents on that. So, but let's take a look at America in the future, the year 2050. So, Hispanic population grow to 28%. And white alone, white Anglos, as we call them here, are 47%. So they are also a minority. By the year 2050, we will be a country of minorities, which makes me think that Miami is already living in the future of America. We are already living in a demographic reality that is more like the future of America than the present of America. And because of that, we have the opportunity to create here the future of the American theater. I wholeheartedly believe that the next great American place will come from places like Miami, from communities as diverse, dynamic as our own. Okay, so start a theater company, but what do we believe? Why? What is our reason to exist? We have 4 pillars at Miami New Drama. The first pillar is artistic excellence. Art doesn't change lives. Great art changes lives. And we talked a little bit about at the beginning of this lecture how great art can change life. I'm not saying that we only do great art, but we always aspire to do great art. Sometimes we get there, sometimes we don't get there, but we believe that artistic excellence is the first pillar.
You have to aspire to something.
Absolutely. And, reflective. It is key for us that our work is as diverse, multicultural, and multilingual as our community. It is important that if we want to get to that 100% of the pie, then we really need to be speaking to that 100% of the audience. And that is not a marketing thing. I went to one of those big marketing conferences a few years ago, and they were like, well, we try to invest, say people, well, one of the big institutions that shall not be named, the Art Center was saying, well, we invest in Black media and Black newspapers, but we still don't find a return on investment, because it's not a question about investing. Yes, it's about giving the artists the keys to tell their own stories. And when that happens, it's extraordinary the response of a community. And we'll see examples in the future, in a little bit of that. um, locally relevant. We need to do work that is in direct conversation with our community. Like, that's the magic of theater. Theater can actually talk to a specific community. And, you know, a lot of theaters across the country write to this community, you know, to this maybe Broadway audience, but I don't care about that. We want to write to the Miami audience. And by being that specific, I think we are being extremely universal. But for us, the key is that everything we do needs to be written, at least, you know, it doesn't need to be specifically written, or most of it are, but if we do something, it needs to be something that directly relates to our audience and nationally connected. We believe that, you know, there are big issues of national significance that we're going through, and theater is an important, extraordinary tool to go through them. And that is the responsibility of theater. We have a great power, and that comes, Spider-Man would say, great responsibility to tackle on the issues of national significance. Okay, very nice. But how do you really go about doing that?
Good question.
Everything we do needs to have a strong why. We can't do something unless we are extremely clear of why are we doing it. So how do we apply those 4 pillars? I'm going to show you some examples of that. You know, our production of Our Town was the first multilingual production of Our Town ever allowed. It had English, Spanish, and Creole at the same time. For those of you familiar with Our Town, the Webbs spoke Spanish at home. The Gibbs spoke a mixture of Haitian Creole and English, and people around town spoke English. So although, you know, this is, Thornton Wilder wrote this play to take place in Grover's Corners, which is exactly where it still takes place. But Thornton Wilder was such a wonderful person, wonderful artist, that he didn't write a story about small town America. He wrote a story about what it is to being alive. And he set it in a community. And the Thornton Wilder estate was really, and we developed a wonderful relationship that then ended up doing another show with them. But they were excited precisely about that. You know, when we decided to do this, it was at a time where nationalism was rising in America. And people look at Thornton Wilder, you know, when was America great? Oh, back in the old days. And Our Town was sort of seen in a way as what it should not have been, you know, of the good old days. And I think it was important for the spirit of what Thornton Wilder was doing to, you know, in this day and age, reimagine what Our Town would be in a multilingual community. And it made the story extraordinary. You know, people were, you know, Hispanic families were looking at, oh, that's my family. You guys wrote my family exactly as they are. You know, a Haitian family were saying, that's exactly how my Haitian mother would say. And it's, no, that's how humans would react. And that was really the beauty of Our Town, is that at the end of the day, we are all humans. We react all the same because we all experience the same feelings. We all fall in love. We all, you know, want to speak to the boy we like, but not sure if he's going to talk to us. Some of us, you know, want to speak to our daughters. You know, it is that whole thing of being alive is what Our Town and Thornton Wilder does so beautifully. Oh my God. Okay, Queen of Basel, for example, it's a world premiere. We commissioned the wonderful writer Hilary Bettis to write. It was commissioned with our community in mind, and we spent a lot of time, you know, working on this piece. We developed here in Miami, and you know, the idea was to create a modern response to Miss Julie, and we did it also using language. We decided, you know, it's a three-hander. Christine and Jean, or John, Juan in this case, they would speak Spanish among themselves, but English to Miss Julie. And that whole dynamic of adding language not only brought it immediately to our community, but also created a whole conversation about what language does status-wise, and it was an extremely interesting piece, and it was extremely specific. It was about, you know, Art Basel, you know, Miami. It's as Miami as you can get, and now, you know, it has been produced across the country. You know, Studio Theater produced it, other theater has been producing it. So, you know, I believe that the more specific we get, the more producible it is elsewhere. I'm not going to show all the shows we've done, but I'm going to show some examples. So One Night in Miami was not commissioned by us, was not a world premiere, but yet it is a play that takes place in Miami, and it deals with issues nationally important and locally important. It's about the night that Muhammad Ali, the Cassius Clay won, became champion of the world, defeating Sonny Liston. And at the end of that night, he changed his name to Muhammad Ali. So where they fought was at the Miami Beach Convention Center, 3 blocks away from the Colony Theater, where our home. The Hampton House, which was the place that the 4 superheroes, Sam Cooke, James Brown, Malcolm X, and Cassius Clay went after the fight. That's a real place in our community. So we partner with them. And then there's a whole exposition of a display of the show after we closed it. We moved the set to the Hampton House. And it was about our community. And it was written by an African-American extraordinary playwright, directed by Carl Caulfield, extraordinary director, born in Miami, raised in Miami. And you know, when, you know, 40% of our audience was African-American, because this was a story told, written, acted by an all African-American cast. And that's how you start conversations with communities.
And it dealt with that they had to stay at the Hampton House because they weren't allowed to stay on Miami Beach.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Jessica. That's key. And we're producing it in Miami Beach, right? So you know, we had to confront to our own, you know, Miami Beach that, oh, you know, there is nothing in Miami-Dade County. There's not a single statue or anything to remember that this was a segregated town. People don't know, especially because 54% of Miami are foreign-born. You know, people don't know that when they see all those movies in the South of segregation, they don't know that that was also Miami. Miami was a segregated city until 1964, especially Miami Beach. So it was important to, and you know, I was very lucky. We have really a wonderful mayor, Dan Gelber, and he really took this as he should, and he spoke, gave a few speeches around the place, saying how important it was to remember, you know, the racist history that our town had, and there was nothing to be ashamed about. Not to acknowledge it, of course, to be ashamed about what happened, but you shouldn't run away from it because you're ashamed of the past. You need to accept the past and make up for it.
And through theater, what better way?
Exactly. No, exactly. And so Fake is another great example of you know, it's a world premiere, a world-class local writer, Carmen Peláez. And what I really find fascinating about this show is that, you know, there's been a lot of stories told about Cuba, the Cuban Revolution, etc. Golem of Havana being one. And just like Golem of Havana, this was not told through the perspective you think. So this is told through the art world, and sort of what the Cuban Revolution repercussion in the art world is, and how you know, the art world deals between the current Cuban dictatorship and the rest of the world. So it's a fascinating look into a subject from a complete. So it resonated a lot with our community. You know, Miami is, as you say, 64% Hispanic, and most of them are Cuban Americans, and so this play really resonated. Confessions of a Cocaine Cowboy. You know, was another world premiere show written by 2 local world-class writers, Billy Corbin, who did the documentary, the classic Miami documentary, that tells the story of Miami in the 1980s drug war, and you know, Oren Squire, who also wrote a couple of, you know, wrote A Wonderful World for Miami New Drama, and and a new show that we will produce whenever we are ready to produce theater again. And this is as Miami as you could get. So much so that on opening night, the two cops who are depicted in the play were there present on opening night. The son of the murderers, Griselda Blanco, was also there on opening night. So it was really about our community as much, absolutely as much as possible. So, one second, okay, sorry. Okay, we need to mute someone. Okay, sorry. Okay, let me go, sorry. All right, so Viva la Parranda, it's another world premiere musical that we commissioned. And it's a documentary musical, which is exciting, and it's a devised documentary musical. It's in Spanish. It's about a small Afro-Caribbean band from Venezuela that played in their small town on New Year's Eve. That's sort of like what they did together. And a friend of mine, Juan Suki, is a great theater director who has now left theater behind and was producing music, sort of came across them and saw that they were, a miracle of world music. And, they went from performing in their small town to performing across the world, European tours, the Kennedy Center, etc. And I thought that story was so fascinating that I was speaking to Juan, and I said, listen, maybe there's a play around this. It's a musical around this. And we spoke and we decided, Miami New Drama would rent a house for them. They stay there for a few weeks and develop together. This is them telling their own stories using their own words. And it's an extraordinary piece of theater. Then was invited to theater festivals around the world, currently on hold for obvious reasons. It was such a community-oriented play in which there's a soup that was stewing all throughout the show, and at the end of the show, the audience comes on stage and shares soup with the protagonist of the story. So it was just really outstanding, and that's them. That's a band playing themselves, and it's just really, wonderful.
People would stay for hours, and it was hard to stop the party afterwards because people enjoyed just staying and being and having that sense of community and gathering. So
right, and then the band would then continue to play, right, Jess? I mean,
yes.
And then it would go there for hours and hours, and it was just a really beautiful moment to create community. So The Cubans, it's another world premiere play written by a local playwright, Michael Leon. Directed by Vicky Collao, local director, and this is a show written for a specific community, the Cuban American community, and that this sort of divide between generations. It's funny to think that no one before the history of Miami had really produced a major work about that specific community, about that. So although we are 64% Hispanic, I don't think any major theater had produced a play about that community in that moment. I mean, of course, there's
that was modern.
Modern, right? Nilo Cruz, of course, patron saint, and my friend Nilo Cruz, reading Anna in the Tropic about takes place in Tampa, and it's more of a 1920 stories of a pre-revolution Cubans in the U.S. Anyways, and then we had because we wrote about our community, we had an extraordinary audience response. The 25 or so performances were completely sold out, every single one of them. Our theater, feeds 400 and some, 417, and we completely sold out for over a month. And I think that your
statement about it's not marketing, it's about the people and the story, because we had a wonderful, fun marketing plan, and I think we scrapped about half of it because
we spent no money. That's right. We didn't need it. We didn't need it. You know, it's true, not every show can be, you know, it's called The Cubans. I mean, this was really a wonderful title that I sort of forced my friend Michael to change it from Eyes That Don't See, but he agreed and he loved the new title. But you know, I think that it proves that when people say no, you know, Miami's theaters are 200, 150 seats a night, a lot of times, sure, I would like to be that small because it's hard, but when you really resonate with the community, I mean, I think that the Cubans could have played for months and months and months and months and months. We completely sold out halfway through the run, and we just didn't have any more nights to open, and it was completely sold out. Sorry, let me continue here. A Wonderful World, that's a show we currently have on hold. We're very excited about it. It's a world premiere. All of them have been, you know, most of them have been world premieres that we've been talking about. You know, it's written by Oren Squire from Miami. Oren, it's an extraordinary, wonderful, beautiful writer that we as a company love him very much. And this is what, you know, when people think about, oh, this is a jukebox musical about, you know, Louis Armstrong, a revival about all his songs, etc. You sort of have an idea in your mind about what that is, but in reality, this is a very different show. It's not what you expect. It's extremely political. It really is, in a way, both the story of Louis Armstrong and the story of racial America in the past, you know, in the 20th century. And it's just, we're extremely proud of it. And it was our first, you know, Broadway aspirational show. It had what's called enhancement money that was, you know, donated to us so that this could be a really big production that could then transfer to Broadway. But as of now, it is paused and hibernating on stage at the Colony Theater. That's exactly the set, the wigs, everything is, it's where we left them with the hopes of returning to it as soon as we are allowed to. So, okay, there we go. Gente Ociosa. It's a show, the world premiere, written by the wonderful Karim Vallecillo. She's a brilliant playwright. It's part of our Spanish language series, which is over the summer. Over the summer, we do a theater in Spanish, and over the summer, we sell as much money in 4 months that we sell in the other 8 months producing theater in English. And this is great because this play was an adaptation of a theatrical, you know, classic theater play seen through the lens of an important community of our city, which is the Venezuelan immigrants. So this Uncle Vanya takes place in modern Venezuela, in the countryside of Venezuela. And I think Karin was brilliant. The show really resonated with the audience. It had a smaller, you know, we create a theater inside the theater, but it sold out. It played, you know, dozens of performances, 20 something or so, until the hurricane came and we had to shut it down. But again, when you resonate with the community, sky is the limit. Come on. Okay, there we go. So we're also committing, we have a strong commitment to future generations. Almost 17,000 public school students have attended our shows for free. Almost 17,000 public school students have attended our show for free. And they come to us by bus. You know, we bus and we do special performance, matinee performances for students. And we also go to them. We've created 2 touring productions. One, the first one was Antigone, and then Caucasian Chalk Circle by Bertolt Brecht, Antigone by Sophocles. And we, throughout the month of February, we do over 30 performances around public schools of Miami-Dade County. And those are some of the most moving work we do. And it's, you know, I think from the moment we decided to do education work, and we decided that really during our town when we did our first free performance, free matinee for students, and we saw the reaction of the audiences, so much so that the actors started to cry halfway through the play, we knew that we had to continue doing this. And there is something really important about it, is that that it is empowering, I think, for students to see people on stage that look and sound like them. It is empowering for an African-American students to see One Night in Miami, a story about 4 Black superheroes that changed the course of America. It's important for Cuban-American students to see the Cubans and seeing their family represented on stage. This is key to who we are as a company, because when you live in a town where only 13% of the work, 13% of the audience is white Anglo, but 95% of the shows are about white Anglo families, you are giving a message to the rest of society and the students that certain narratives are more important than others.
And these all happened. These moments happened. They're not just ideas that we created. I personally heard students walk in from Brownsville Middle School to One Night in Miami, see the Hampton House sign and be like, hey, I know that place, and just light up. So those are significant things that have happened in our history as a theater company.
And so that's why we're always a minority majority on stage. We always have to have a stage that somewhat represents what Miami looks like. That is key. Otherwise, we would not be doing justice to our diverse community. Also, we use every part of the cow. It's an expression my grandmother used to say. Give us a marquee, we'll do art with our marquee. We'll use our marquee as a response to what's going on, sometimes even daily. Funny enough, you can fit 140 characters in our marquee. So that is sort of like a modern, an old day, a vintage Twitter for us. And sometimes they've gotten viral, etc. And I think all of this is because we have a why that is really developed. So all of this come natural. Once you know your why, then it's really easy to expand to do other things. Oh my God. Okay, all this is wonderful, but your theater is closed and it doesn't look like you can do a play anytime soon. Gee, thanks. Now what? Why? Again, I think that if you know your why, you are going to be able to survive whatever complicated times we are living in. And I think we are fortunate enough to have our why very clear. And these are on a personal note, I believe that there are 3 rules for theater during the pandemic. Number 1, do no harm. Don't put people in danger. If opening, I know how much people want to do theater, but if doing theater puts people in danger, don't do them. We are all about, about being alive. That is what theater is about. And so no matter how important we think our work is, which is very important, it can never be more important than life itself. So if we have to sleep for a while in the traditional sense, then we sleep for a while. The second rule is assume it's not theater. It can be a great educational tool, what we're doing now. I think you can have a class, which is just as good as if you had it in present. But I think that this idea of doing, plays in Zoom, etc., there's a word for that, and it's television, film. So I don't think that that's the way forward. So I have to say there are some exceptions, and I would urge you guys to check what Juggernaut Theater here locally with a New York company are doing, where they're actually, that's the closest I've seen of something being digital theater. I don't know if the word theater, but most likely it is theater. And what's more important is that it's exciting. So I'll urge you guys to check that. And then whatever you do, it's something that you would do it even if you could produce at your theater. So whatever idea you have, and we are working on a few, you would still want to do it even if you could do a play inside of your theater. So I think those are kind of like our three commandments as we are imagining the future. So all of this is sort of things that we are working on that I just wanted to share with you guys on how to talk or how to work through what we are living. But how artists can help us really enter a new post-pandemic era. And I just want to, again, go back to the idea of great art changing history. And there's a couple of examples here that also come in complicated times, right? So Ai Weiwei, Han Dynasty, China, 1995 was changing the beginning of both of opening up and closing in on the police state. Ai Weiwei destroyed a Han Dynasty vase and used Mao's own words, saying like, Mao said, we have to destroy the past in order to build a future. So it was a really controversial work of art that was about that moment in time of changes in China. Keith Haring, his work on the AIDS crisis is outstanding. I just picked one of the many few, but really he brought main culture into paying attention to the AIDS crisis. And I think that is an outstanding response, and we should all continue in his spirit. I kind of love this Guerrilla Girls work of art. Do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum? Less than 5% of artists in the modern art section are women, but 85% of nudes are female. I mean, this in itself is a work of art, and it's in a way also part of what Miami New Dramas fight is about representation. That's why almost all of our artists that we commission work are artists of color. We are we commission both female. We have as much female playwrights as male playwrights working and commissioning the work, and we think that representation, and this is an important moment in time that actually changed. I mean, the great thing about the Guerrilla Girls is that they changed the way museums work, and they, the window might be cracked. I don't think that the job is done, but the conversation started. Then, again, Norman Rockwell is such a cool guy, and sort of he has the same problem as Thornton Wilder, is that people sort of like, oh yes, Norman Rockwell, good old America, when America was great. But in reality, this is Norman Rockwell responding to a to the civil rights era, and this is a 6-year-old girl trying to. And the beauty is that he painted it from her perspective. We see her center. We don't see the people protecting her to enter their face, but we do see the tomato thrown at her. For me, it's very moving because this is the age of my older. I have twins that are that age, and I think it's a spectacular work of art during the time of the civil rights era. So I think this also helped a very complicated time help us perceive it in an interesting way. But we are theater makers, right? So here's great examples of works of art, of theater during complicated times.
We of course can't cover them all.
We can't cover them all, yes. And I'm just putting here Hamlet, although, just because it's the first time that someone took a really in-depth look at the human soul in a way that I think that it opened then the doors for Freud and from psychology. And for like this, I think Hamlet is the first time that we, as a humanity, saw really what it was to go into the soul of a person who's there. The first existentialist words, from that. That's the first line in the play. It became really about who's there, really. Who is there? A God? To be or not to be? What it is to be alive? And I just want to take that as an example, but a more specific example of moment of crisis. Trojan Women by Euripides. It's the capture of the city of Melos and the slaughter of its population by the Athenians. Euripides was an Athenian and also an Athenian soldier. So this play is about how the victors, slaughtered those that they conquered. And in that same year where the Athenians slaughter the mainly women and children population of Melos, Euripides wrote, didn't call it the women of Melos, but the Trojan women. He, just like in Golem of Havana, he chose, just like I did in Golem of Havana, he chose, I don't want to compare but you know what I mean. He chose another moment in time to tell that story. And I think that made the Athenians understand exactly what he was doing and understand the shame of what they had done. Larry Kramer's The Normal Heart was, again, artists fighting the AIDS crisis, the great big epidemic of our times. While the government was ignoring the pandemic, really Larry Kramer went ahead and wrote this extraordinary, piece of theater that if you see it, you can't, you'll still be haunted by the AIDS crisis. It's impossible not to see it, and it's beautiful, and it's the way that only theater can tell a story. And then, for example, Molière created Tartuffe at a moment, which a moment that repeats itself when, the religious people trying to be the most virtuous of all and trying to impose their will on the rest are sometimes, the most hypocritical of all. And I think that was what bothered Molière the most, that those religious virtues were trying to be put upon others. Not that religious is fine to do it on your own, but when you're trying to push other people into your own virtue and values, most likely, people who push that are hypocrites who have white stands on bathrooms. Okay. So I just want to finish with this quote. I regard the theater as the greatest of all art forms, the most immediate way in which a human being can share with another the sense of what it is to be a human being. It's Oscar Wilde. I think this depicts exactly what it is, why theater is different from any other art form. And why, because of that, I think we are the art form that can really help now tell the story of what we just been through, of what we are going to go through for the next few years. And whenever we are able to be back, I am excited about the new works of theater, or how theater is going to be transformed by this. Theater has been living, at least as we know it, for 2,500 years, more than, that's almost 2,500 years more than film or the internet, and I think that the theater will find ways to overcome this, and going back to the idea that storytelling is at the core of who we are as human beings, and storytelling that remind us that we are alive and that we are human beings is the best absolutely possible type of storytelling. Thank you so much for joining, and I think we're going to start our Q&A session. I'm going to stop my screen, if I can just find a way to do that. And stop share. All right.
have James Watson, who has raised his hand, so I'm just gonna allow him to talk and ask his question.
Great.
I'll see. What's your question, James?
You have to unmute him, I think. Okay.
Oh, I did. Oh.
Okay.
Are you there, James?
James?
Talking is permitted, so you might. Well, if there's any other questions, oh, we have Lowell. Okay, great. We have a different question from Lowell Williams.
Lowell Williams. All
He's
right.
done this before. He knows how this rolls. So.
Hi.
Well,
Hi, Lowell, my friend. How are you doing?
Good. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How are you? Good. It was a great presentation. Have a couple of questions and comments. Question came up when you were showing the statistics, your pie chart of the racial makeup of America and Miami.
Yeah.
And I've been coming to see your plays and see you at Miami Drama. Actually, I think my first play was The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity.
That's right.
And I've seen a number of plays there, and I fell in love with you and your theater. That's agape kind of love. And so because of the diversity perspective that you take on theater, and I'm thinking about, for instance, you said you have a number of students who come to see plays. They came to see One Night Miami, saw, and they could identify. Now, I'm at a point where I want, as a teacher, former teacher, and theater maker, to have those same kids want to come to see Antigone and see themselves and understand that there's something in that play that should be able to resonate with them. I'm also mindful, you are aware that I have worked in of a theater in Miami, the M Ensemble.
That's right. The M Ensemble is the longest running theater company in Miami and one of the longest running African-American theater companies in the country. It's an exceptional, wonderful, extraordinary theater company that I admire very much.
Exactly. I guess my question and comment is, I wish all those people that came to see the Cubans would go see plays at the M Ensemble, and vice versa. All those people that go to see the M Ensemble would come to see plays at Miami Drama, that African Americans would want to go see the Cubans, for example, and get something from it. I came here from New York, and I've learned a lot about what it means to be Cuban once I moved to Miami. Right. So those are just some things that maybe you could speak about crossing theaters from different, the fact that we have a mainly predominantly Spanish-speaking community now, but we have a lot of Black people who don't speak Spanish. Are we going to go see, you understand the point I'm making?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, Lowell. Thank you so much for your question. I'm going to respond to it. I think that I think it's a key point what you're saying, which is, how do we make the pie bigger, right? I have to say that there is data on our part that, when we do it's interesting. I should have shared this with you. I love data. I am an artistic director obsessed with data. And I do these zip code maps for every show that we do. I create a zip code map and see who's buying from what communities they're buying. And for example, the top 10 zip codes from the Cubans didn't share a single zip code from the top 10 zip code of all times for us. So this was a completely different audience coming to see, coming to Miami Drama to see the Cubans. But the beauty of it is that 2 of those zip codes then became in the top 10 zip codes of A Wonderful World.
Great.
So the more, I think you're going to have some retention. In the same way, after One Night in Miami, we had 40% African American, audience see that show. And then from then on, our percentage of African American was still, you know, above 10% or so. So after that show, the doors start, you know, we're beginning to open. But I think that, you know, other theaters, I think, yes, I think M Ensemble, I think you're right. We should all, I think there is still room to improve between the theater companies to try to, especially those that talk to audiences of color. We need to do an effort to work together. Thank you so much, Lowell, for your question.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go to the Q&A for a second. Do you have any input on the outlook of rehearsals for actors?
Marjorie is saying that. What an interesting question. No, I have no idea. I think that we're talking about, I'm sure she's referring to the pandemic, right?
I think so.
Yeah, so I think that until we can produce work, we shouldn't be able to rehearse. I mean, I think that
there's a lot of things to figure out at the moment, but the safety is important, and that's what's holding things up, because the unknown. But
absolutely, but what's a wonderful question.
But it will happen.
Yes.
And they will be safe and
indeed
respectful to the performer. Okay, we have Andrea. I'm gonna allow her to talk.
We have a few questions. Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Andrea. How are you doing?
Hello. Good. How are you? Thank you so much for the lecture. I really appreciate a lot of the information. I really love a lot of the work that Miami New Drama has done. I've been very lucky to be able to see a couple of productions, and I'm really interested in asking how you choose work in relation to audience. Not necessarily in the sense of all these things that you've been talking about demographic, but I mean like the core messages, because I've noticed when I see shows at Miami New Drama as an audience member, things resonate very deeply with me, and it doesn't seem like you're shoving it down my throat, if that makes any sense. Sometimes I feel like I see theater and there's messages or marketing and it's very pushy and very like, this is what the audience needs to leave with, this is what the audience needs to see. So I'm really interested in how Miami New Drama does that very seamlessly. Like the messages and the stories are very impactful, but it never seems like you're pushing it or forcing an audience to feel anything. So I'm really curious as your perspective to that, like as a director and also as an artistic director of a company.
Those are wonderful questions, Andrea. Thank you so much. I wanted to write down a few things so that I wouldn't forget it in my answer. You know, first of all, we commission work. You know, we are 70% of the work we do is world premieres, most of them commissioned by us. So, you know, and the way that works is, you know, for example, I saw here a message by Carmen Pelay, she's here today. We would have a lot of conversations about our community and sort of about, for example, you know, there's something we're working now about the political system. And so after those conversations, then we decide, you know what, why don't you spend some time writing about this and see what comes up. And so we have about 20 plays in development in different stages. Maybe not 20, but for sure like 15 or so at different stages of development. And whenever they're ready, then we produce them. So it's a really organic process. I don't try to shove it. If something is not ready for one season, then I would try to find something to replace it. In an ideal world, we only do world premieres because Miami is such a unique city that I don't think that making things that were popular in New York would help me much. I mean, sure, but because we have such a unique voice, let's exploit that voice. Let's make that voice heard. You know, we try to always do work that asks more questions than answers them, and I think that's sort of what you were referring to. We are very thank you very much for mentioning that, because we are always very key to that we shouldn't, you know, try to be prescriptive, but we rather want you to leave with more questions that you begin with. And then the why. I mean, really the why, like every time we do a show, I sort of have to write down an essay of why we're doing this show. And I do it, and I write it as an exercise. So that there is sort of an idea of why we're doing this. So I don't know if that answers your question, but thank you so much for asking it, Andrea.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Andrea. Crystal Millie Valdez, hello. What advice do you have to stay creative and sane at this time? Also, just want to say thank you for giving a burst of inspiration during this bleak time. Thank you.
And we love Crystal. Crystal is an extraordinary actress and also a member of Miami New Drama family. So you're asking me personally, I'll answer personally what I'm doing. I'm creating my own gin and my own limoncello. And I've been, doing a lot of, so it's wonderful because you work with botanicals. I mean, it's a creative process. It ends up, and I think it's related because Dionysus, the god of wine and alcohol, is the same god as theater. So I feel like I'm not necessarily betraying my own religion. So I am creating, yesterday actually, after about 6 weeks of letting Everclear rest with lemon zest, I mixed the syrup and it created my first 5 bottles of limoncello. And I've done gin. I call my gin quarantine. Jessica, you can laugh a little bit at Jessica's not laughing very much at my jokes, but quarantine, you're the only audience, Jessica, so you have to really be the representative of it. And listen, I've also been commissioning a lot of work. It's a great time to talk with writers and commissioning work. And I've been riding my bike a lot every day for an hour until I fell down and broke my knee and my wrist. My wrist is more or less healed. My knee is not. I have a brace from the top of my feet to all the way to my very upper leg. Don't necessarily have to do everything. Be careful riding bikes out there. Okay, what else?
Okay, Jose, how to finance a small theater company? Did you use your savings to start?
Jose, this is it's a key question. And the answer is yes. I mean, to start the theater company, I had to raise a lot of money and I had to put a lot of money. I was blessed with the fact that I had purchased a small apartment in Harlem, and then I sold it when I left there 4 or 5 years later, more than twice for what I paid for it. So that gave me, and then I more or less spent quite a bit of that money producing Golem of Havana in Miami. I hope my kids never know this, that once they had money and then they didn't because I spent it. But yes, and I think it's part of the, of the sad aspect of theater, which is, how dependent of money is. I think that there are other ways around it. I think that, immediately enough, I mean, I could have just done that shot once. That's it. And I did that once, but, then the Knight Foundation, the Miami-Dade County Cultural Affairs Office, the city of Miami Beach especially, they sort of came in and helped fund the project, as well as our board of directors that helped raise a lot of money and individual donations. So yes, there's a lot of money needed to do theater. I don't think, a lot of stories, unfortunately, are, the Woolly Mammoth also started when the artistic director won a lawsuit for something else and then put that money into starting the theater company. Sometimes it needs that kind of miracle.
But to take it to the next step, you had a very clear why, and you could speak to it, and you could speak to it clearly, even though you did not have years and years of producing history. You still spoke so clearly and had a vision that people just listened and wanted to join you on that track. I included, me included. Grammar. So, Fran, I arrived from Venezuela 7 months ago. I was working really hard with a theater company there in Valencia, Venezuela. What do you recommend about a new start here in the US?
you know, it's a very good question. I think the why. I think why and who and where. Why do you want to make theater in the U.S.? Who is your community? Why your work is important to that community? I think that if you're able to put that into words and really find a community that is hungry, I think those are the first steps. I have to also say that it's really complicated, especially in the moment we're living in now. If you're in, by any case, in Miami-Dade County has some great community grants to start with, and best of luck.
All right, gonna move on. What is your advice to aspiring directors just out of undergrad? What would you say is the best way to get started in the field without an MFA?
To assist other people. I think a lot of, you know, part of the problem with today's, you know, is that you sort of like need an MFA in order to really jumpstart it. Yeah, I mean, it's a problem. I don't think that everybody needs an MFA at all, and MFAs are expensive. And you know, I think that you learn a lot by working. You know, I assisted some great directors. I assisted the great John Doyle, who you know, directed the Broadway winning production of Company, where the actors performed the instruments, and The Color Purple that was recently on Broadway, and I think I learned a lot from working with great masters. I had mentors, you know, people like Moises Kaufman, who was a great mentor, and I learned a lot from him. I went to work at regional theaters and assisted people like Chris Ashley from La Jolla Playhouse, and not only learned about you know, directing plays, but about running an institution that I admired that very much. Yeah, I think that I absolutely think you should you know, assist, or whoever young director should assist, should get to know theater companies, and sort of be around, and so that's my 2 cents.
How do you choose the playwrights you commission from Christina?
Christina Pla Guzman, we love her very much at Miami Drama, and her work as a critic of theater. By the way, the same problem of diversity that we have in the theater, we also have it in the reviewers of theater. And when the reviewers of theaters are also, you know, accustomed to seeing, you know, work that resonates with their own identity, it's hard sometimes to resonate with different stories. So I'm very happy that Christina exists in the world. So, you know what, friendships, it's sort of you know, the artists of my generation. I sort of know a lot of the theater makers that came of age with me. I think that my time at New York Theater Workshop, you know, gave me a great network of people, and then that network introduced me to other people, and you know, and sometimes, you know, people just, hey, write an email, hey, Michel, I'm a playwright, here's my work, and you know, I don't normally maybe get to see that there are people in the office that maybe read it before and then say, hey, you know, because we don't take unsolicited work, and if we do, we take just, we're very few people in a very busy company, but eventually, you know, somebody will read it and say, like, Michel, this is great, you should read it, and then I get excited about it and call that playwright, and that's how leadership works.
One more allowed person from the audience, potentially.
Well, there's 3 people raise their hands, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But switching over there. So Darlene.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm a local writer here in South Florida. I've lived here most of my life. I just want to thank you, Michel, for your presentation. I love the passion of your approach. The why is definitely the core, the center. I love how you suggest that collecting the pieces of chaos of social issues leads us to a message, which is the why. I truly believe that within chaos and confusion lies opportunity. So that's a great way to find the core of our message in the plays. your demographic approach is excellent with the zip codes. Theater community is the fabric emotionally. And also, lastly, I love your formula for addressing what is. There's no fluff. It's important to definitely enforce change and self-actualization. So I really appreciate the suggestions that you made today. Thank you.
Darlene, thank you so much. It really means the world to me for you to say that. Thank you.
All right, great. Jesse Sabatino. Oh. Welcome, Jesse.
Oh, hi. I'm actually a student at Hunter College in Greg's class.
Oh my God, amazing.
I'm all the way in New York. But I'm just wondering if, one, this is like an amazing presentation, but I'm wondering if and how Miami New Drama's, I guess, position in the community or role in the community has changed because of COVID, because it feels like we can't gather and we can't all eat soup together the way that we would like or have. So I guess how are you rethinking your position in Miami's community, I guess, period.
Well, first of all, Jesse, thank you so much for your question. I've been able to talk to Gregory Mosher's class a couple times, and they're really bright, wonderful students at Hunter College. If I didn't say it enough during this presentation, Gregory Mosher was someone who changed my life. He was one of my greatest mentors, and I love and admire very much. One of the great leaders of the 20th century in the theater field. Google him and then light a candle for him, because we are so blessed that he exists. Now, to respond to your question, so we're doing this, for example, you know, we're doing free classes because that's who we are in a community. And then if you look at the people teaching that classes, those people look like what our community looks like. We are, you know, as I said before, at a time where we don't want to do no harm. So we have to be really smart about how we can talk to our community without putting people in danger. We found that the master classes series are an interesting approach to it, a good way to do it. And we're still figuring out. I mean, you really asked a key question that we're all thinking about. There is now something concrete that we are working on that's sort of more or less, I definitely think that resembles theater. It's going to be for later on, for a few phases of opening. But meanwhile, you know, we give back to the community by having conversations about theater and bringing world-class artists. Not today, unfortunately, today we have to settle for me, but normally world-class artists to the presentations. So thank you very much, Jesse, for your question. And Christopher Vergara, I love Christopher. Christopher, by the way, is the costume designer for Golem of Havana. I love this man more than you can ever imagine. He's badass, fierce, beautiful artist that if he was here right now, I'll give you a big kiss. How are you, Christopher?
Muy bien, Michelle. Thank you for taking my question. I wanted to sort of underline the importance of what you do about representation. I remember when I first realized that professional theater was an option and that I could watch sort of the thing called the Tonys on TV and watch theater, because I grew up poor here in New York and, you know, couldn't afford to go to see a Broadway show. But the disappointment and feeling that the only place for me there would be like playing a giraffe. Like I didn't see myself, and for a long time had to fight that back. But so my question is, and this is what I've enjoyed in working with you, but in seeing all the work that you do, when you do that work that reflects the community and the diversity of the community, how do you bring that authenticity to the work? I think a lot of theater companies a lot of times want to try to do that, add that to their repertoire of being representative of the community and sort of have missteps. But I find that in the work that Miami New Drama does, it's so well received, and the community feels seen in the work. And I wonder how you make that happen, because it doesn't always happen.
Thank you very much, Christopher, my friend, for that question and for all your wonderful words. You know, I'll give you an example. As an artistic director, I directed no play this season, and I only directed one play last season. You know, I believe that the keys of the story needs to be given to the artists who are best equipped to tell that story. And so, you know, we give, you know, Carl Caulfield, Black Miamian superhero, brilliant theater director, was the person to tell the story about that community, and he, you know, had the complete freedom to hire whoever he wanted. And I think that is why I think that work really resonated and felt authentic, and you know, the same as you know, we really we bring in artists that we trust, and we give them way more freedom than normal theater companies would. So I think that I'm so glad that you think that comes across, because that is key for us, that it is not, you know, we're not pandering. We're not doing a version in Spanish of a popular musical, but in Spanish, hoping to bring a Hispanic audience. But we are really giving the artist the work, the keys to the building. And I think the more we trust and the more freedom we give, I think the more empowered artists feel. And listen, I've also worked at theater companies where the artistic director would be breathing down my neck and telling me to change things. And I knew that once I started my theater company, I didn't want to be that. I want to be a theater company that really trusts the artists that they hire. So yes, thank you for your question.
That leads in a little bit to Sylvia's question, and we love Sylvia as well. Would you
yes, of course,
help
Sylvia.
me or someone unknown like me to reach my community and the rest of the communities with a play written by me, like the Lorca I made or other stories I want to tell? Always really wanted to work with you. I would say this comes back to the Cubans as well.
Right.
The writer of the Cubans, Michael Leon.
Right. So
unknown.
Yes, Sylvia is also a wonderful member of Miami New Dramas family, and I think that, you know, she's an example. She's a great artist from Tenerife, from Spain, and she has slowly, as an actress and as a director, find her own footing. And her show was produced last year by a theater company here, and I think she's doing extraordinary work. And you know, I think that sometimes great things happen in small places. I think that the idea that, like, oh, if I would only have this one big space, then I can do my work. I think that whatever space you open for yourself, if it's good, then, you know, things are going to start from there. You know, Nilo Cruz won his Pulitzer after his show was produced here by the New Theater, in a theater of like 90 seats or something, and that won the Pulitzer Prize. So, you know, great things can happen in small scale. I think part of the issue with Miami New Drama is that the Colony Theater is such a big theater, 400 seats, and that we sort of have to produce work that is for a 400-seat theater. And so hopefully, as we grow and get a second space, we'll be able to sort of have more spaces for more storytelling that is not necessarily for that bigger stage, but we can be more intimate as well.
Georgina, how would you encourage white artists, like me in parentheses, to be supportive and involved with the type of work you do?
That's a great question. And, you know, I just want to be very clear that, as you could see, we do hire white people, right, Jessica? I mean, look at that.
Yeah, and I'm not fluent in Spanish, and yet I enjoy the Spanish shows. So
yeah, we of course work as well. We also work with white Anglos. You know, David Greenspan directed and wrote the show we started this season with, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, and I'm sure if we look at it. There might be others here and there. Well, we work with Jen Weinman, who she directed The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity, and of course Desires, etc. We looked at everyone for
Point is, you can be involved with us, but how can she be supportive of the work we do?
Come to the theater, be a part of the family. And I think that, you know, it's a mistake if people think that Miami New Drama is against. We are a rainbow of people. We tell everyone's stories. We tell everyone's, and everyone in Miami is important, not one community. Listen, we were going to do now our show for our Asian American community, that there's only 0.2% in Miami, but yet we were committed to that as well. I mean, of course, everyone's welcome. Come to a theater. Look, I'm always there. I sometimes give a speech or not, but I'm always there. Come and talk to me. You know, well, I'm talking about as if in the near future we're going to do it, and I hope that's the case. But I'm always there. My email's on the website.
Yeah,
you know,
that's supportive. You can share what we're doing, come to what we're doing, and be that person. So we have Jason Williams.
Oh my God, I love Jason. Jason is the star of A Wonderful World. He plays a terrific Louis Armstrong. It's unbelievable to see him work. Is just outstanding. So hello, Jason.
Hey, baby boy.
How are you doing?
What's going on over there?
Yeah, there you go.
How's everybody?
The old pops.
I'm
How are you doing?
I'm great. I am great. Oh God, I am so great, and I'm so blessed to be among the living, the breathing, and the blessed. I don't have a question. Since I have so much time on my hands, I just wanted to express how proud I am of you. Can you hear me?
We
Yes.
can hear you, absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to express how proud I am of you. I've watched these mastermind workshops since the pandemic, and you truly know how to bring like conversations to the table that engage a community of artists building upon their craft. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. When I'm not an actor, I build these kinds of programs in schools, like back in New York. And I've been doing that since I could remember. And so this resonates with me. That's why I'm in love with you, not in that sense. I don't want the world
I am in love with you in every sense, Jason Williams.
Yes. But that's why I've fallen in love with you, because I feel like we have such we have a bond because of that feeling that I have with you, that connection. And you know, since being a part of the new drama, the family. I hate speaking on these things without being on camera, but since being a part of the Miami New Drama family, I've seen nothing but love and compassion, like in your soul, and that makes a difference in being a leader. So if you've never been told, I want to be the first to tell you how proud you make us as artists and fellow directors and artistic directors. It is very important, especially for the Black and Brown people in the community, because we are going through a hardship as we speak. And it's been that way for a long time, but this company has made a difference in my life. And I just wanted to let you know that if you had not known, I've learned so much since being a part of this piece. And whenever it's safe to get back, I'm hoping that this will happen again. I know it will, but I'm just speechless at what I could say about how indebted I feel towards you for bringing such art and bringing such history to a space where everyone doesn't really grab hold to that. That's all I wanted to say to you.
Thank you, Jason, my friend. Thank you so much for your beautiful words. We are so grateful that not only we've spent a lot of time with you, but that I know we're going to spend quite a lot of time with you in the future, because you've created an extraordinary Louis Armstrong, and that show has so much life in it, so much, you know, we know that when we're going to be back performing it as if we're going to perform it both for the first and the last time, because we already know what it is to have something dear and losing it. So whenever we're back, and as you know, our set is frozen in time until you return, and kiss Sleeping Beauty, and sort of turn the pause. So thank you very much, my friend, for your wonderful work.
And thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
You've been like a building block. Like the things that you guys, like I won't talk about it on this, the things that you have done and gone out of your way for me has been nothing but beautiful. And I'm going to write about that in my book. But but it's been amazing, and I just feel so blessed to be a part of you. And you have no idea. Like I have questions, and I do have needs, and I do have wants, but you guys have been just amazing, and I can never thank you for what you've done for me during this time.
Wow.
We love you, Jason. Thank you so much for your beautiful, kind words. And we're threatening him that he should, do one of the master classes. We totally need to talk to him, and
I'm waiting for that.
and figure out the date. So wait for Jason to have his own master. I can't wait for it. All right, thank you so much, my friend.
We have a simple question and then one more.
Yeah, but I just wanted just a shout out because my dear friend Keith Randall-Smith wrote something. I don't want to read it out loud because it's very, very beautiful what he wrote. But I just want to, like that guy, Keith Randall-Smith. I still, he did the stage manager of our town, and going through the crisis that we've been going now, I think of our town all the time, and the beauty of my memories is that I get to think of it with his voice and his performance, and that just makes it much easier to go through what we're living. And I can't wait to have Keith again back in Miami. We're so blessed to have worked with him, and can't wait to work with him again. Okay, what other questions? I think Carmen has her, or you.
Yeah, we're gonna do the simple question first. And
okay,
then
there you go.
Carmen.
Simple
What books on theater directing can you recommend?
It's a great question. Okay.
Maybe not simple.
So Anne Boger wrote a book called A Director Prepares. And I would totally read her book. Moises Kaufman, my mentor and friend, just published last year a book, Moment Work, His Technique. I recommend that 100%. I recommend anything Peter Brooks wrote. Like I read that as if it's the Bible. And he has a couple of books, The Empty Space, most famous one. There's a book I love that now the author, and I talked about it before, the author just escaped me, called Different Every Night, that I really found it to be a wonderful book about sort of improvisation and how that goes into the directing path. Improvisation, I think it's sort of like people don't take it as seriously as it should, but it's really an extraordinary technique as a director. So that is more or less
those are good starts.
Recommendations.
So,
yeah.
Carmen, we're gonna close this thing out with Carmen.
Oh
Welcome.
my God, Doña Carmen Peláez, a dear. She's just make sure she wrote the world premiere of Fake, and we're also working with her in another project. She also starred on Fake, and we love her dearly. Another member of the family.
Thank you. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes. Yes,
okay, so I hate giving you compliments because I much prefer to argue with you.
That's right, and I love arguing. You're the one person I love arguing the most, Carmen. So skip the compliments and let's go directly to the argument.
I always walk away a little smarter with a different perspective and still wanting to choke you, but it's always good. What do you call it? I think one of your greatest gifts as artistic director is the way that you absolutely trust the artists that you bring into Miami New Drama. I've never felt more supported, more trusted. You really take ego out of the equation and you make it all about the work. I find that a lot of institutions are top heavy in a way that they take the needs of the artist and their wants and their hopes, and they kind of like put that in the back seat, and it becomes all about something else. But you're quite the opposite. You put everything that we hope for our work, and you put it in a way that you make that front and center of creating the work that we hope to create. I think that takes a lot of courage, but can you also talk a little bit about why that's your approach, or, you know, what, you know, how that is? Because I think everybody would benefit from working with you, but I think they would benefit from knowing how you feel or why you do that with artists, like the reasoning for that.
Listen, I'm not, thank you very much for your question. Like, to be completely honest, I want to work with artists that I admire and that I find way more intelligent and talented than I am. And so that's the complete honest, like the people that I admire dearly, and then let them have it. You know, of course, you know, as you know, I give some notes and I try to, you know, be present, but I primarily just admire those people and feel very lucky to be working with those artists. I think that's key. I'd much rather be in a position in which, you know, everyone else is smarter than me.
Nice. It's a joy.
Well, in your case, of course, it's
yeah. There's always an exception, but I still appreciate it.
Love you, Carmencita. Stay
Love
safe.
you too.
Oh, great.
All right.
I think that closes out this class. It was very successful. Thank you. And thank you, Michelle, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Jessica, why don't you remind us that number people can text?
Oh, yes, I put it in the comments. But yes,
Okay,
if you text MIND, M-I-N-D, to 56512, you make a small gift to show your appreciation. And also just share our next classes on your social media so that we can keep this going into June and keep connecting with our community.
And we have classes both in Spanish and in English. So if you speak Spanish as well, then you know you get double the fun. Because they're completely different. So thank you again. I appreciate, Jessica. You ran this beautifully. Thank you very much, Jessica.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll.